I'm going to stand up because I'm too short. But all of you know I stood up in a standing ovation for all of you. I am so happy. But I also want to say something that connects our whole day with you and Carlina Rinaldi, who is one of the greatest teachers of our world. But it begins with actually Justice Benjamin, who's not looking at me this moment. He's caught like a student. And I want to remind us all of what he said about home. You have given us a wonderful definition of home. Justice Benjamin, you reminded us of the various definitions of home. But I turn to much better. I turn to what? Helen, to Cardinal, and to Ram. Oh, Ram. Oh, I'm so happy. Oh, who together, especially in the morning with Maryanne, Carola, and Fauna, have made us all a home together. I could not be more grateful to all of you to feel we have a new expanded home. And now, turn my slides on, please. And where is the clicker? We will need the clicker. Oh, Georgiana, my dear friend, who I'm so happy to see here. Yes. So I'm coming to you from UCLA, where my talk is going to use California as an example of how we could potentially propel our youth to be like all of you. And Carlina, you said, how can we make education something that will be this great reciprocal? I study language. I study written language, oral language. And I never thought I would use this quote, but because of you, I want to, and especially Carlina, what you said about education. Flaubert said, language is that cracked kettle that we beat for bears to dance to, all the while we wish to make music that will melt the stars. That is what we want. Education, the study of language, the use of written language to propel music that will melt the stars. Now, I have to give you a traditional talk. Actually, I should, because of my colleagues from UCLA and because Marcelo lured me to UCLA telling me that LA was better than Boston ever could be. 18 months later, he's in Boston and I'm in LA, happily. But it is in this context that Marcelo brought me, and that is because literacy is a basic human right. The UN has said that, we all know that, but we don't know the deep meaning within it. But I would suggest to you, since Ram asked me to give a talk on climate literacy, to suggest to you that it is part of the transformation process. Now, I'm using a book by Roxana C. about California's fight against the sea as my beginning of a hinge moment that we're all part of. Everyone here is about knowledge, its transformation into action. We are the first generation to feel the consequences of a warming planet and the last generation that can steer a different course for you, our children. You who are sitting in that row have now become ours, and it is a happy parentage, I will say. But we have another figure, if you will, who gave all of us a way to think that has been different. And many of you are quoting the various encyclicals. But this one essay really made me feel so much. It's how I think about what's happening today. Where the danger is also grows the saving power. That's the genius in the human story. There's always a way to escape destruction. Where humankind has to act is precisely there. In the threat itself, that is where the door opens. For us, for those of us here who are using knowledge, I use Alberto Manguel, who I just saw a few days ago, who used Kipling's story, The Eye of Allah, to say, for the pain of the soul, there is outside of God's grace but one drug, and that is learning, that will propel the action of his, her own mind. That's really what I want to think about as all of us gather our thoughts these last talks, because we're going to be reflecting on all the things, but it's using knowledge, it's using learning to change our mind. And here is, this is a stolen, not a borrowed, this is a stolen slide from Frank Niepold, who some of you know, who's in climate education and the workforce. But he pulled together all these various things that help us build climate literacy. And I don't know if Marcus Coleman is here. Marcus, I don't know. But when we talk about faith organizations, faith communities, government, education, Tracy, I don't know if Tracy's still here, but all the work on workforce, all of this contributes. But government has a place. And part of the California story is that we have been using bills, using legislature to change how we do business in the schools. So we have 3 bills that we are using. We have many children-based initiatives. Now, this is not something that you're these are the slides you don't want. But I want to emphasize just a few of the principles under these initiatives. One of them, the Education and Environment Initiative, is really to actually help give standards to science. Climate-ready issues are looking at the school buildings. Melissa, you and I talked about this at the round table, how the school can be the locus when we have all these various devastations, which in California are a dozen a month. But we also have something called preparedness ambassadors that I offer to our Massachusetts colleagues, an idea of 4th graders who are actually just like all of you, who are the ambassadors to figure out what do we do in crises. We have people from all over California, the UC, the CSU systems, deciding how can we be sure, actually I should go back to the bottom one, how can we be sure to do what Joaquin asked us, and that is the how. I've started many a talk with Kant's 3 premises, questions, but this 3rd one is really something that I believe across all of our talks. How do we educate? We educate, Carlina, from the start, you especially up till 5, our group from 5 to grade 12. We want to ensure that science is part, climate action, not just climate knowledge. Climate knowledge and climate action are part of science and the entire curriculum. Working with community organizations, whether they're aquariums or museums. But I'm going to spend just a few of my minutes on what we are doing in the UC-CSU collaborative on neuroscience, which is my area, diversity and learning. And we are trying to pull together. I look at Corolla, cognitive, social, emotional development, Mary. I look at all of us who are doing something with government, climate science. The person on the right bottom is one of our UCLA graduates who is talking about how the indigenous use deforestation. Our knowledge, however, is at the top, literacy and brain development. Some of you in the various academies have heard me talk about it before. It is my great passion, love, dedication, commitment to understand how the brain changes through written language. But in this instance, Ram is asking me to say, how can you take that knowledge and understand how climate literacy from K to 12 can change the trajectory of our children's lives and our teachers? Now, I'm going to say, only because I can't help myself, I have a few brain slides. Impossible. I'm impossible. But I want you to know that the human brain, that tree, I loved, Carlina, the tree has a brain of wood. If only I could speak 3E. You saw me. I chortled over this. But the brain was never born to read. It has to develop a completely plastic circuit. And that circuit's plasticity is what we can use for every child. We can use what is there to make a whole new, if you will, design. We, when we start studying the human brain, move from this very basic circuit into an area where background knowledge, empathy, very importantly, empathy begins with story, whether it's read or told. And Professor Lee, I used a story from Korea so that you would have it. We are using stories for our diverse learners to say that the differences are what bring us together, and we must understand other. Carlina, you talked about empathy. Empathy has been a leitmotif implicitly in so many of your talks. Empathy, written language, literacy, climate literacy gives us a moral laboratory for what the philosopher Martha Nussbaum called the compassionate imagination of our youth. But I would be remiss, no matter what, not to emphasize to you that climate literacy needs exactly what deep reading, and some of you heard me with Ezra Klein talk about deep reading. The importance is the combination of empathy plus critical analysis for the ability to discern and evaluate truth and to differentiate from the start. Our children, our youth need to be able to evaluate what is disinformation, what is information. And I think Justin is part of this climate communication from Yale, but I'm not sure. Is he here, Justin? Where are you here? He had to leave. Oh, good heavens. But, this slide is my gift to my former chancellor, Marcelo. It is Thomas Aquinas. Why? Thomas Aquinas is representing the full panoply of all the things that go on in your brain when you are really thinking. But that requires time. And disinformation and misinformation are utilizing the norm which is skimming, especially on digital devices. I have written books about this. If you ever want to read more. But Thomas Aquinas said something so important. At the end of deep reading, at the end of what I will call deep climate literacy, is the ability to bring your own insights together with the new knowledge and form something that you hand to others. And Thomas Aquinas said this first: we must hand on to others the things gained in contemplation. It is here that faith and the work in theology and spirituality. My teacher said this, John Donne: wisdom is not contemplation alone, not action alone, but contemplation in action. A colleague that many of you know, Steve Pinker, talks to us about habits of mind. But I need to also add diverse thinkers. Diverse learners are an important part of the equation. And you may not know it, but on the top, my governor is dyslexic. And today, Chip Robertson is giving a seed grant on diverse learners to our collaborative. But I want to end with two young women. One just wrote this essay. The environmental issues are becoming so dire that even the children must now take action, and that is our children right here in this room. The morality and clear view of the world that children possess could do wonders for the world. We've already seen it demonstrated. But my last two slides come from the Pope, and then I will end. He said, education is one of the most effective ways of making our world and history more human. Now listen to this. Education is above all a matter of love and responsibility handed down from one generation to another. Now look at my last slide that is multi-generational. Bending the curve from one generation to another, a high school student is propelling an entire curriculum on climate literacy. She is Rom's granddaughter. And so I say thank you, and I truly mean this. Godspeed to all of you.